Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the massive alien vessel grow larger on the screen. The Valian ship looked like a floating crystal palace, all smooth curves and glowing lights. It was 10 times bigger than his own ship, the Harmony's Edge. "Sir, they're sending another message," said Choi Nari from her station. She was their communications officer, young but smart. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as alien words filled the air. The translator worked hard to make sense of the complex Valian language. "They say we must wait in our ship for 3 days. It's their purification ritual before any meeting with Princess Kira." Park Ji-won, his second-in-command, shook her head. 3 days just sitting here? That seems like a waste of time." Minho nodded. He understood that different aliens had different ways of doing things. But 3 days of waiting felt wrong when they had important work to do. Earth had sent them here to make friends with the Valians, one of the most powerful groups in this part of space. "Kim Dae-ho, how are our systems?" Minho called to his engineer. "All good, Captain, though I'm getting some strange readings from the power core. Probably nothing serious." Dae-ho wiped his hands on a cloth. He always had oil on his fingers from fixing things. The hours passed slowly. The crew tried to stay busy, but waiting was hard. They could see the Valian ship through, their windows, beautiful and mysterious. Sometimes they saw movement inside, shadows passing by the glowing walls. On the second day, things started going wrong. "Captain!" Dae-ho's voice came through the ship's speakers, full of panic. "The power core is overloading. That strange reading. Yesterday wasn't nothing. It's getting worse fast." Minho ran to the engine room. The smell of burning metal filled the air. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. Dae-ho stood in front of a control panel, sweat running down his face. "What happened?" Minho asked. "The core is feeding back on itself. Some kind of reaction with the Valian ship's energy field. If I can't stop it, both ships will blow up in about 20 minutes. Can you fix it from here?" "No, sir. I need to get to their power system and adjust the frequency, but they won't let us board their ship for another day." Minho felt his heart racing. 20 minutes to save both ships. No time for alien rules and ceremonies. "Nari, tell them we're coming over now. Emergency situation." The young woman's face went pale. "Sir, they're saying no. They say we must wait. The princess cannot be disturbed during her meditation period. Tell them both ships will explode if we wait." More alien words came through the speakers. Nari listened, then looked up with fear in her eyes. "They don't believe us. They say their sensors show no danger. They think we're lying to skip the purification ritual." 15 minutes left. "Ji-won, get ready to board their ship. Dae-ho, grab your tools. We're going over there right now." His crew moved fast. They had worked together for 2 years and trusted each other completely. Within 3 minutes, they were in their small shuttle, flying toward the crystal ship. The Valians tried to stop them. Their ship's defensive systems activated, creating a barrier of energy. But Ji-won was a good pilot. She flew around the barriers using moves she learned in the Earth Space Force. "There's an airlock on the lower level," she said, pointing at the screen. "I can get us there." The shuttle shook as Valian energy beams tried to push them away. But they weren't trying to hurt anyone, just stop them from boarding. 10 minutes, Captain," Dae-ho said, checking his instruments. They docked with a hard bump. The airlock opened with a hiss. Minho stepped through first, followed by his crew. They found themselves in a hallway that looked like the inside of a diamond. Everything was smooth and perfect, glowing with soft light. Alien voices echoed through. The ship. Footsteps came running toward them, but Minho didn't wait. He followed the energy readings on Dae-ho's scanner, running through hallways that seemed to go on forever. They passed rooms full of aliens in long robes, all staring at the humans with shock. The Valians were tall and thin, with pale skin and large eyes. They moved like dancers, every step perfect and planned. "This way," Dae-ho called, turning left down another hallway. The energy readings got stronger. They were close to the power source, close to where they could fix the problem. Minho could hear more aliens running behind them now, shouting in their musical language. 5 minutes, Dae-ho said. They came to a large door made of the same crystal, material as the walls. It was sealed shut. Minho pushed against it, but it wouldn't move. "Stand back," Ji-won said. She pulled out her plasma cutter, a tool they used for emergency repairs. The beam cut through the crystal like butter. The door fell apart. Beyond it was a room that took their breath away. It was huge, with walls that seemed to go up forever. In the center was a woman sitting on a floating chair, her eyes closed in meditation. She had the same pale skin and large eyes as the other Valians, but she was different. More beautiful, more powerful. Her clothes were made of fabric that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. This had to be Princess Kira. Around the room were control panels and displays showing the ship's power systems. Daiho ran to them immediately, his tools already in his hands. 2 minutes, he said, working fast. Princess Kira opened her eyes. They were silver, like mirrors reflecting moonlight. She looked at Minho with complete surprise. Her mouth opened, slightly, but no words came out. In her entire life, no one had ever walked into her private chambers without permission. No one had ever interrupted her meditation. No one had ever ignored the sacred rules that protected her from the outside world. But here was this human man, standing in her most private space like it was the most normal thing in the universe. His hair was messy from running, his clothes were wrinkled. He didn't bow, didn't kneel, didn't show any of the respect that every other being in the galaxy showed her. Instead, he just stood there, breathing hard, watching his engineer work on her ship's systems. 1 minute, Daiho called out. The princess finally found her voice. She spoke in perfect Earth language, which surprised Minho. You walked in, without warning, without permission. Yes, Minho said simply. Sorry about that. Emergency. Behind them, Valian guards finally caught up. They poured into the room with weapons drawn, shouting orders for the humans to surrender. But Princess Kira held up her hand, stopping them. She was still staring at Minho with those silver eyes, like she was seeing something she had never imagined could exist. Done, Daiho said, stepping back from the controls. Both ships are safe now. The princess looked around her chamber, then back at the human captain. For the first time in her very long life, she had no idea what was supposed to happen next. Princess Kira dismissed her guards with a wave of her hand. They looked confused but obeyed, backing out of her chamber slowly. Their weapons stayed ready, just in case these strange humans tried something dangerous. Minho and his crew stood in the middle of the beautiful crystal room, looking around with curiosity instead of fear. This was not how aliens usually acted in her presence. You saved both our ships, the princess said, her voice soft and musical like all Valians. But you broke every law we have about approaching royalty. Laws are important, Minho replied, but not when people might die. Daiho was still checking his instruments, making sure the power systems stayed stable. All good now, Captain. No more problems. Princess Kira watched the engineer work. In her world, no one did manual labor in front of royalty. People who fixed things were kept far away from the palace. But this human just did what needed doing, right in her private chamber. I should have you arrested, she said, though her voice held no anger. Park Ji-won stepped forward. Unlike everyone else who met the princess, she didn't bow or lower her eyes. She looked right at Kira like she was talking to any other person. That would be pretty unfair, Ji-won said with a small smile. We just saved your life. On Earth, people usually say thank you first. The princess blinked in surprise. No one had ever spoken to her so casually. Her advisor, Veltar, appeared in the doorway. He was old even for a Valian with silver markings on his pale skin that showed his high rank. Your Highness, he said in their own language, these creatures have committed the worst crime possible. They must face punishment. We're standing right here, Choi Nari said cheerfully. And we understand. Valian, not perfectly, but enough. Veltar looked shocked. Most aliens needed years of study to learn even basic Valian. How did these humans understand so much? Princess Kira found herself curious about these strangers. How long did it take you to learn our language? About 6 months, Nari replied. Your grammar is complicated, but the sounds are beautiful. Like singing. Something strange happened then. The princess smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was real. Veltar stepped backward like he had been hit. Valian royalty did not smile. They were supposed to be perfect, calm, and unchanging. "Tell me about your world," Princess Kira said, ignoring her advisor's worried face. For the next hour, the humans talked about Earth. They told her about blue skies and green forests. They described rain and snow, things the Valians had never experienced on their perfect climate-controlled worlds. Minho talked about leading his crew, how they worked together like family instead of following strict ranks. Jiwon explained human military tactics, which seemed chaotic compared to Valian precision. Daeho showed her pictures of the machines he had built, rough and practical instead of beautiful and perfect. "You make things that are ugly?" the princess asked, looking at a photo of one of Daeho's repair jobs. "Ugly but useful," he said with a grin. "Sometimes pretty things break easy. Ugly things last forever." This was the opposite of everything Princess Kira had been taught. Valian culture valued beauty above all else. Their ships, their buildings, their clothes, even their words were chosen for perfection. "Show me how you fix things," she said suddenly. Veltar made a sound of horror. "Your Highness, that is not proper. Royalty does not watch manual labor." But the princess ignored him. She led the humans to another part of her ship, where some of the systems still showed damage from the power overload. Daeho looked at the beautiful crystal control panels and shook his head. "This is your problem right here," he said, pointing to a section that glowed with soft blue light. "Too pretty, not practical. When something goes wrong, you can't fix it fast." He pulled out a piece of metal from his toolkit. It was gray and plain, nothing like the elegant Valian technology. But when he attached it to their system, the damaged readings immediately improved. "It works better now," Princess Kira said, amazement in her voice. "Ugly but useful," Daeho repeated with another grin. Other Valians gathered to watch. They had never seen anyone modify their perfect technology before. Some looked disgusted, but others seemed fascinated. Young Officer Lithera came forward. She was one of the princess's personal guards, trained in combat but curious about everything. "Can you teach me that?" she asked Daeho. Veltar made another sound of shock. "Lithara! That is not appropriate for someone of your station." But Princess Kira held up her hand again. "Let her learn." For the rest of the day, the humans worked with curious Valians. Jiwon showed their patrol ships how to change course quickly during flight. On Valian ships, every movement was planned in advance and never changed, but Jiwon taught them to react to new information instantly. "What if the enemy does something unexpected?" she asked. "Enemies do not act unexpectedly," replied Commander Zephron. "All beings follow logical patterns." Jiwon laughed, a sound that made several Valians jump. Laughter was another thing they rarely heard. "Humans are terrible at being logical. That's what makes us good fighters." She challenged Zephron to a practice battle using their ship simulators. His tactics were perfect, following centuries of Valian military science. But Jiwon kept doing things that made no sense, attacking from weird angles and changing her plan every few minutes. She won easily. "I do not understand," Zephron said afterward. "Your strategy was chaos." "Exactly," Jiwon replied. "Chaos is hard to fight because you can't predict it." Princess Kira watched all of this with growing wonder. Her people had achieved perfection through order and planning. Every aspect of their society was controlled and predictable. But these humans showed her something different, the power of being spontaneous. That evening, she did something that shocked her entire crew. She invited the humans to eat dinner with her, not a formal state dinner with hundreds of rules about which fork to use and how to sit, just a simple meal where they could talk. During dinner, Nari told jokes that made the princess laugh out loud. The sound echoed through the dining hall like music. Servant and guards stared in disbelief. "Your Highness," Veltar whispered urgently, "people will talk. This is not how royalty behaves." "Maybe it should be," Princess Kira replied quietly. After the humans returned to their ship for the night, the princess sat alone in her chamber. For the first time in her long life, she felt excited about tomorrow. She wanted to see what other, impossible things these humans would do. Outside her window, she could see their small ship next to her enormous one. It looked so simple compared to her crystal palace. But she was beginning to understand that simple did not mean weak. The humans had walked into her life without warning, and changed everything in a single day. She had smiled, laughed, and spoken directly to people instead of through ceremony and ritual. Her advisor was right to be worried. This was not how Valian royalty was supposed to act. But for the first time ever, Princess Kira did not care about being proper. She was learning to be human instead. The next morning brought new chaos to the Valian ship. Princess Kira had announced that the humans would stay as her guests instead of returning to their own vessel. This decision sent shockwaves through her crew. Han Seojin, the human doctor, was the first to cause a stir. He had asked to visit their medical bay, claiming he wanted to learn about Valian healing methods. What he found there made him frown. The medical bay was beautiful, like everything else on the ship. Crystal walls glowed with soft light, and the equipment looked like art instead of tools. But when Seojin examined a Valian crew member who had hurt his arm during the previous day's excitement, he shook his head. "Your diagnostic systems are amazing," he told Dr. Yeltari, the ship's chief medical officer. "But your bedside manner needs work." Dr. Yeltari looked confused. "I do not understand this term." Seojun sat down next to the injured Valian and smiled at him. "How are you feeling? Does it hurt much?" The crew member seemed surprised that anyone cared about his feelings. On Valian ships, medical treatment was efficient but cold. Doctors fixed problems without worrying about comfort or emotion. "It hurts," the crew member admitted quietly. "That's normal," Seojun said in a kind voice, "but we can help with that." He gave the Valian something for the pain, then spent time explaining what the injury meant and how it would heal. Other crew members gathered to watch. They had never seen a doctor talk to patients like they were friends instead of broken machines. Meanwhile, Yoon Minji was causing her own problems in the navigation center. She was their best pilot after Jiwon, with an unusual talent for finding paths through space that others missed. "Your navigation is very precise," she told Navigator Kethanol. "But it's also very slow." The Valian showed her their route planning system. Every journey was calculated weeks in advance. Every possible danger was mapped out. Every fuel stop was scheduled to the minute. "What if you need to change course quickly?" Minji asked. "We do not change course," Kethanol replied. "All routes are planned for maximum efficiency." Minji pulled up a star chart and pointed to a region marked in red. "What about this area? Your charts show it as dangerous, but look at these energy readings." She had noticed something the Valians missed. The dangerous area had calm spots where ships could pass safely. But finding these spots required quick thinking and intuition, not advanced planning. "Impossible," Kethanol said. "Our computers have analyzed this region for centuries. There are no safe passages." "Computers are smart," Minji agreed, "but sometimes you have to feel your way through. Watch." She convinced them to run a simulation. Using a combination of sensor data and pure instinct, she plotted a course through the dangerous region that cut their travel time by half. The Valian navigators stared at the results in disbelief. Their perfect planning system had been beaten by human guesswork. Princess Kira heard about these incidents throughout the day. Each report made her more interested in human methods. But the most disturbing news came from her agricultural decks. Kim Aaron had joined the crew just before this mission. She was young and enthusiastic, with a talent for growing things. When she saw the Valian food production systems, she was both impressed and frustrated. "Your plants are beautiful," she told Agricultural Supervisor Mel Thor, "but they're not very healthy." The Valian food gardens were perfect. Every plant was exactly the same size and color. They grew in neat rows under carefully controlled light. Temperature and humidity never changed by even a tiny amount. "Our food production is the most efficient in the galaxy," Melthor said proudly. "No waste, no variation, no unpredictability." Aaron walked through the gardens, touching leaves and checking soil. But no real nutrition either. These plants are like pretty pictures instead of actual food. She showed him readings from her scanner. The Valian crops looked perfect but contained fewer vitamins and minerals than they should. The strict control that made them beautiful also made them weak. "May I try something?" Aaron asked. Melthor looked nervous but agreed. Aaron took seeds from her own supplies and planted them in a small corner of the garden. Instead of following the strict Valian growing rules, she let the plants grow naturally, Some grew taller, some shorter, some had different colored leaves. "It looks messy," Melthor complained. "But taste this," Aaron said, picking a fruit from one of her plants. The taste was incredible, rich and complex, full of flavors that the perfect Valian crops had lost long ago. Melthor's eyes widened in surprise. "How is this possible?" "Sometimes imperfection makes things stronger," Aaron explained. Word of these changes spread throughout the ship. Some Valians were excited by the new ideas, others were horrified. The breaking point came when Princess Kira herself started changing. She had always worn formal robes that required servants to help her dress, but that morning she appeared in simpler clothes that she could put on by herself. Instead of the elaborate crown that marked her rank, she wore her hair loose like Choi Nari. When she spoke to her crew, she used simple words instead of formal royal language. She asked questions directly instead of speaking through her advisors. "Your Highness," Veltar said during their daily meeting, "the crew is becoming confused. You are not acting like yourself." "Maybe this is who I really am," the princess replied. "Maybe I just never had the chance to find out before." That afternoon, everything changed. Long-range sensors detected a massive fleet approaching their position. The ships belonged to the hegemony of Keth, a military empire that had been expanding across this region of space for decades. Admiral Tefrin, commander of the Valian Defense Forces, called an emergency meeting. His face was grave as he showed them the sensor readings. 47 warships, he announced. "They will be here in 6 hours. This is the largest Keth fleet we have ever seen." The Valians had always considered themselves safe from the hegemony. Their technology was superior, and their defensive strategies had never failed. But as Admiral Tefrin explained their battle plan, Minho saw problems. "You're going to fight them in formation?" he asked. "Of course. The sacred formation of 7 stars has protected us for 1,000 years. Jiwan studied the tactical display. "But they've been watching you fight for decades. They know exactly what you're going to do." "Our formations are perfect, Admiral," Tefrin replied. "The enemy cannot improve on perfection." "They don't need to improve it," Minho said quietly. "They just need to predict it." Princess Kira listened to this exchange with growing worry. The humans were right. The hegemony had studied Valian tactics for generations. They would be ready for every traditional strategy. "What do you suggest?" she asked. "Let us help," Minho said. "Our ships are small, but we know how to fight unpredictably." Veltar stood up angrily. "Your Highness, you cannot seriously consider putting these aliens in charge of our defense. They are not trained in proper warfare." "No," Minho agreed. "We're trained in improper warfare, and sometimes that works better." Outside the ship, the Keith fleet grew larger on their sensors. 47 ships full of warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds. They were coming to add the Valian Empire to their collection. Princess Kira had to make a choice. Trust in the traditions that had kept her people safe for millennia, or gamble everything on these strange humans who had walked into her life without warning. She thought about the past few days, about laughter and simple food and plants that grew stronger when allowed to be imperfect, about doctors who cared about feelings and navigators who trusted their instincts, about a captain who had broken every rule to save lives. "Admiral Tefrin," she said finally, "you will work with Captain Minho. We will fight this battle using both Valian and human methods." The room fell silent. No one could believe what they had heard. Their perfect princess was about to gamble their entire civilization on the chaotic ideas of aliens they had known for 3 days. But as the Keth fleet continued its approach, Princess Kira felt something new inside her chest. Not the calm certainty. She had been trained to feel fear, excitement, hope. She was learning to be human, and it terrified her. It also made her feel more alive than she ever had before. The bridge of Princess Kira's flagship became a storm of activity. Admiral Tefrin stood at his command station, looking uncomfortable as human officers worked alongside his perfectly trained crew. The mixing of their two styles created controlled chaos that made many Valians nervous. Captain Minho studied the tactical displays showing the approaching Keth fleet. 47 ships in perfect attack formation, moving like a single deadly organism toward their position. The hegemony had Been conquering worlds for decades using overwhelming force and careful planning. They're good, Ji-won admitted, analyzing the enemy formation. Disciplined, organized, experienced. They know exactly how Valians fight. But they don't know how we fight, Minho replied. Admiral Tefrin pulled up the traditional Valian battle plan. 7 groups of ships would form a defensive pattern that had never been broken. Each group had specific roles and positions that had been perfected over centuries. The sacred formation has protected us since the Great War, he explained. Every ship knows its place. Every captain knows his duty. We will destroy them as we have destroyed all invaders. Minho looked at the formation and saw the problem immediately. It was beautiful, perfectly balanced, and completely predictable. The Keth fleet was approaching in a pattern designed specifically to counter it. They fought you before, he said. Look at their positioning. They're ready for your sacred formation. Impossible, Admiral Tefrin replied. No enemy has ever broken our defensive pattern. Because they never knew what you were going to do, Ji-won pointed out. But these guys have been watching you fight for years. They've figured it out. Princess Kira watched the argument from her command throne. Part of her wanted to trust the traditions that had kept her people safe. But she had learned something important over the past few days. Sometimes the best way to solve problems was to throw out the old rules and try something new. Show me the human way, she said. Minho moved to the tactical display. Instead of the neat, organized Valian formation, he started sketching something that looked random and chaotic. We split up, he said. Small groups moving independently. No set pattern, no predictable strategy. Each group makes its own decisions based on what happens in the fight. Admiral Tefrin looked horrified. That is not warfare. That is confusion. Exactly, Minho said with a smile. You can't fight what you can't predict. The plan that emerged was unlike anything in Valian military history. Mixed groups of human and Valian ships would attack from multiple directions at once. Some groups would be decoys, drawing enemy fire away from the real attacks. Others would hit hard and fast, then disappear before the enemy could respond. Daiho had been working with Valian engineers to modify their ships. The beautiful crystal vessels were powerful but slow to change course. His crude modifications made them uglier but much more maneuverable. Your ships are like dancers, he explained to Chief Engineer Woltar. Pretty to watch, but they can only do one dance. We're making them into fighters instead. Lee Hyasung worked with Valian communications officers to create new signal protocols. Instead of the formal, precise messages Valians normally used, they developed quick codes that could be changed during battle. The enemy will be listening, she explained, so we'll talk in ways they don't expect. As the Keth fleet came closer, Princess Kira could feel the tension on her bridge. Half her crew was excited by the new tactics. The other half was terrified of abandoning their traditional ways. Your Highness, Veltar whispered urgently, it is not too late. We can still use the sacred formation. And lose, the princess replied quietly. These humans may be chaotic, but they're right about one thing. The enemy knows our old ways too well. The battle began at long range. The Keth fleet opened fire with their massive weapons, targeting the positions where Valian ships should have been according to the sacred formation. But those positions were empty. The mixed human-Valian groups had scattered across space like leaves in the wind. Admiral Tefrin watched his sensors with amazement. I cannot track our own forces. They are moving without coordination. That's the point, Ji-won said from her position at the tactical station. If we can't predict where we're going, neither can they. The first Valian ship to score a hit was the destroyer Crystal Wind, commanded by Captain Lith-Ara. She had learned human tactics from Ji-won and used them to approach the enemy fleet from an impossible angle. Her ship's weapons, modified by Daiho's crude but effective improvements, punched through the shields of a Keth cruiser that had been expecting attack from the front, not the side. Impossible, Admiral Tefrin exclaimed. No ship can maneuver like that. Ugly modifications, Daiho said proudly from his engineering station. Pretty ships break, ugly ships win. The battle spread across space as more Valian ships used human tactics. Instead of staying in formation, they darted in and out of the enemy fleet like angry insects. The Keth commanders, who had planned for an organized Valian defense, found themselves fighting dozens of small, unpredictable groups. But the humans had their own part to play. The Harmony's Edge and two Valian escorts performed the most dangerous mission of all. They flew straight into the center of the enemy formation, drawing fire from every direction. "Are you insane?" Commander Zephron asked over the communication channel. His ship was taking heavy damage as enemy weapons focused on their small group. "Probably," Minho replied, spinning his ship through a series of turns that no Valian pilot would ever attempt. "But we're keeping them busy while everyone else attacks their flanks." Princess Kira watched the battle from her command throne, her heart racing with fear and excitement. This was nothing like the careful, organized conflicts she had studied in school. It was chaos, unpredictable, and terrifying. It was also working. The Keth fleet, designed to fight against organized opponents, struggled to deal with the scattered human Valian attacks. Their communications became confused as they tried to coordinate responses to threats coming from every direction at once. "Enemy flagship is turning," reported Navigator Kethanol. "They're trying to retreat." "Let them go," Minho said. "Chase them and they'll regroup. Let them run, and they'll tell everyone else that Valians have learned new tricks." But Admiral Tefrin shook his head. "We do not allow enemies to escape. Honor demands that we pursue." "Honor gets people killed," Jiwon said bluntly. "Smart tactics. Keep them alive." Princess Kira had to make another choice: follow the ancient codes of honor that demanded pursuit of fleeing enemies, or accept the human idea that winning was more important than glory. "Let them retreat," she ordered. The Keth fleet fled in disorder, leaving behind 8 destroyed ships and dozens of damaged vessels. The Valian forces had lost only 2 ships, both to lucky shots in the early stages of the battle. As the enemy disappeared into hyperspace, the bridge fell silent. Everyone was trying to process what had just happened. They had won a battle using tactics that went against everything they had been taught about warfare. "Casualties?" Princess Kira asked. "Minimal," Han Seojun reported from the medical bay. "Most injuries are minor. The scattered formation prevented concentrated fire." Admiral Tefrin looked at his tactical displays in disbelief. "We defeated a superior force using chaos and confusion." "Not chaos," Minho corrected. "Flexibility. The ability to change and adapt when the situation changes." Princess Kira stood up from her throne and walked to the main display. The battle was over, but she knew this was just the beginning. Word of this victory would spread throughout the galaxy. Other enemies would come, and they would be ready for the new Valian tactics. "We will need to keep changing," she said. "Keep learning new ways to fight and defend ourselves." "Your Highness," Veltar said worriedly, "change is dangerous. Our people have survived for thousands of years by maintaining stability, and now we'll survive by learning to adapt," the princess replied. She looked around the bridge at her mixed crew. Humans and Valians working together, combining their strengths to create something new. It was messy and imperfect, and completely different from everything she had been taught about proper leadership. It was also the most alive she had ever felt. The victory celebration that night was unlike any in Valian history. Instead of formal ceremonies, there was laughter and storytelling. Humans and Valians sat together, sharing food and experiences. But Princess Kira knew that bigger challenges were coming. The hegemony of Keth would not forget this defeat, and her own people were divided about the changes she was making. Change was never easy, even when it saved lives. Especially when it saved lives. 3 months after the battle, Princess Kira stood in the Great Council Chamber of the Valian homeworld. The room was magnificent, with crystal walls that reached toward the stars and seats for the 100 most important leaders in their empire. But today, the beauty felt cold and threatening. The High Council had summoned her to answer for her actions. At the center of the curved chamber sat Zethmor the Eternal, eldest of all Valians and keeper of their ancient laws. His silver eyes held no warmth as he looked down at her. "Princess Kira," his voice echoed through the chamber like winter wind, "you stand accused of corrupting our sacred traditions with alien influence." Around the chamber, council members in elaborate robes murmured their agreement. These were the leaders who had guided Valian society for thousands of years, maintaining the perfect order that kept their civilization stable. Beside the princess stood Captain Minho and his crew. They looked small and plain compared to the magnificent Valians, but their presence gave Kira strength. "I stand accused of saving our people," she replied, her voice steady despite her fear. Zethmore raised one pale hand, and recordings of the recent battle filled the air above their heads. Holographic images showed Valian ships breaking formation, attacking in chaotic patterns, working alongside crude human vessels. "You abandoned the sacred formation," Council member Lithus accused. "You allowed aliens to command our ships. You rejected 3,000 years of military wisdom." "I adapted to survive," Kira answered. "The old ways would have gotten us all killed." "Better to die with honor than live in chaos," Zethmore declared. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. These leaders had never faced real danger. They lived in perfect cities, on perfect worlds, protected by the very military traditions Kira had been forced to abandon. Admiral Tefrin stepped forward. The old military commander looked uncomfortable in the formal council chamber, but his voice was strong. "Honored council," he said, "I have served the Valian fleet for 400 years. I have never seen an enemy defeated so completely with so few losses. The princess saved thousands of lives." "By destroying our culture," Council Member Velthara replied coldly. "Reports say Valian citizens are copying human behaviors, laughing in public, speaking directly instead of through proper channels, modifying perfect technology with crude improvements, and producing better food," added Melthor, who had joined them from the agricultural ship. "Healthier crops, stronger plants, more nutrition. The human methods work." "Work is not the question," Zethmore said. "Purity is what matters. We are Valians, not humans. We do not change. We do not adapt. We do not lower ourselves to alien chaos." Princess Kira felt anger building inside her chest. For 3 months, she had seen the positive changes spreading through her people. Valian engineers were learning to build practical instead of just beautiful. Doctors were treating patients with kindness instead of cold efficiency. Pilots were learning to trust their instincts along with their instruments. "You call it chaos," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I call it life." "Life without order is meaningless," Zethmore replied. "You have forgotten what makes us great." "No," Kira said, stepping forward until she stood directly in front of the eldest counselor. "I've learned what could make us greater." She gestured to the humans standing beside her. "These people walked into my chamber without warning and changed everything. They showed me that perfection without growth is just another kind of death." "Pretty words," Zethmore said dismissively. "But the council has made its decision. You will choose, Princess. Abandon these alien influences and return to proper Valian ways, or abandon your claim to the throne." The chamber fell silent. Every person there understood what this meant. If Kira chose change, she would lose her royal status and the power to protect the reforms she had started. If she chose tradition, all the improvements would be lost. "You cannot make me choose between my people and progress," she said. "We can and we do," Zethmore replied. "What is your answer?" Before Kira could speak, a new voice echoed through the chamber. "The answer is that your choice is false." Everyone turned to see a young Valian woman entering the chamber. She wore simple clothes instead of formal robes, and her hair was arranged in the practical style humans preferred. Behind her came dozens of other young Valians, all showing signs of human influence. "Lithara," Princess Kira said with surprise. The young officer had become one of her strongest supporters over the past months. "Your Highness," Lithara said, with a bow that was respectful but not submissive. "We speak for the new generation. We have seen what happens when Valian wisdom combines with human adaptability. We will not go back to the old ways." Zethmore stood up angrily. "You have no voice in this council, child. Return to your duties." "Our duties are to the future of our people," replied another young Valian, Engineer Kolseth. "And that future includes change." More voices joined in. Young scientists who had learned to experiment instead of just following established formulas. Artists who had discovered that imperfection could be more beautiful than precision. Farmers whose crops were thriving using human-inspired techniques. "Enough!" Zethmore's voice boomed through the chamber. "Guards, remove these dissidents!" But when the guards stepped forward, they hesitated. Many of them were young Valians who had fought in the recent battle. They had seen how human tactics saved lives. They had learned to respect both traditions. "Captain," Minho finally spoke up. His voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the great chamber. "On Earth, we have a saying. The only constant is change. Maybe that's something Valians need to learn." "We do not need lessons from primitives," Zethmore snapped. "These primitives saved your empire," Admiral Teferin said firmly. "Perhaps it is time to listen to them." "Princess." Kira looked around the chamber at the faces watching her. Old counselors set in their ancient ways. Young Valians hungry for something new. Human friends who had shown her a different way to live. She made her choice. "I will not abandon either my people or progress," she announced. "If the council cannot accept change, then the council must change." She turned to address the young Valians who had come to support her. "You represent the future. You have learned that we can keep what makes us Valian while adding what makes us stronger. I choose to lead that future." "Then you choose exile," Zethmore declared. "You are no longer princess of the Valian Empire." "Perhaps," Kira said with a smile that would have been impossible for her just a few months ago. "But I am still a leader, and I will lead those who want to grow." Over the following days, something unprecedented happened in Valian history. Nearly half their population chose to follow the former princess instead of the High Council. Young people, scientists, soldiers who had fought in the battle, farmers whose crops were flourishing with new techniques. They established new colonies in distant systems, places where they could experiment with combining Valian and human ways of life. The colonies were not as perfect as traditional Valian worlds, but they were vibrant and growing. Captain Minho was promoted to Admiral of the Joint Colonial Fleet, commanding ships crewed by both humans and progressive Valians. Princess Kira, who now called herself simply Kira, became the elected leader of the new colonies. Years passed. The traditional Valian Empire remained powerful but unchanged, still following the same perfect patterns they had used for millennia. The new colonies grew and prospered, developing technologies and societies that neither humans nor Valians could have created alone. When the hegemony of Keth returned with a massive invasion force, they found something they had never expected. Instead of choosing between the rigid Valian Empire and the chaotic Colonial Alliance, both sides worked together to defend their region of space. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Traditional Valian formations provided stable defense while human-influenced colonial ships struck with unpredictable tactics. The combination was devastating to enemies who had prepared to fight one style or the other, but not both. After the victory, even Zethmore had to admit that change had made them stronger, not weaker. The final scene took place 10 years after that first meeting in the Crystal Chamber. Kira, now a seasoned leader, stood in the command center of New Valian, the capital of the colonial worlds. Around her, human and Valian children played together, their games incorporating both structured Valian rules and chaotic human creativity. Admiral Minho approached with his latest report. Their hair was both showing gray now, but their friendship had only grown stronger through years of working together. "The newest colony ship is ready for launch," he told her. "Mixed crew, destination unknown. They'll explore and establish settlements, wherever they find good worlds. Just like the old days," Kira said with a laugh, "walking in without warning and seeing what happens." She looked out the window at the bustling city below. It was not as perfect as traditional Valian architecture, but it was alive with energy and possibility. Humans and Valians worked side by side, each learning from the other. "Do you ever regret it?" Minho asked. "Giving up being a princess?" Kira considered the question. She had lost a throne, but gained a life full of surprises and growth. She had given up perfection and found something better.